Good afternoon, Mr. Cragen, Dr. Kleiss, Ms. McQuillan, Ms. Hicks, Ms. Fleming, teachers, parents and family members, and fellow graduates. It's great to see you all in person after so long, and I think we have to thank Mr. and Mrs. Wright, Dr. Kleiss, Ms. McQuillan, Ms. Fleming, Mr. Duncan, Ms. Hicks, Ms. Rochelle, all the tech guys back here, and everyone else at OSC and Shangri-La for making this event happen in such a short amount of time while ensuring all of our safety. I'd also like to thank all of you for being here, be it physically in person or virtually via Zoom or the live stream, to celebrate OSC's class of 2020 despite all that's going on in the world right now. Even if we can't see you face to face, know that your presence here means a lot to us. Lately, I've been reflecting on some of the conversations I've had with students from OSC's graduating classes of 2019 and 2018. And I recall how many of them explained that after going through the grueling college admissions process and 2 years of the IB, come graduation, they realized that things don't always go as planned. But I think in our case especially, the disparity between our plans or initial expectations for the future and reality has just grown exponentially. Since the start of DP1 last year, more and more has changed, and our plans have veered further and further off course in increasingly short amounts of time. At this point, so much has changed and is changing that we often find ourselves contemplating what could have been if we had had exams, or if we had had a proper last day of school, or if we had participated in that final SISA event or that final spring gala concert, or if things just had been different, and if we had had a proper senior year. But even though we may not have had these opportunities, I think it's important that we recognize that even though we don't have control over the future and what's happening around us, we have complete control of our attitude and our response to what's happening around us. As Ms. Fleming would say, although we've been victimized, we're in complete control of whether we decide to make this a victimhood. It's important that we don't define ourselves as victims and let these retrospective hypotheticals lead to frustration and disappointment, and we must avoid rash, irresponsible decision making. Remember that COVID-19 is still a very real threat even though we are here today. And although we may not be the demographic most at risk, we should be mindful of everything we do and the risk our actions pose to society as a whole. At the same time, I think we have to recognize how fortunate we are and be grateful to the people responsible for our success thus far. Undoubtedly, it's far easier to do so amidst the massive global economic downturn we're seeing today, but let me elaborate. Firstly, I think we have to thank our teachers, everyone back at OSC, and even the IB, for giving us access to a world-class education. But I think we have to be grateful for the education we received, not because we're better than anyone else at taking exams or because we've memorized more content than anyone else, but rather because we've been exposed to a wide variety of subject areas and in the process gained what I think are three really important skills. We've learned how to clearly articulate ideas, be it in speech or writing, and in turn, cooperate with others. We've learned how to think through difficult problems and evaluate different solutions to them. And finally, and probably most importantly, we've learned to learn large bodies of content in reasonable amounts of time. In addition to this world-class education that has taught us how to communicate, think, and learn, I think we have to be especially grateful to our parents. Their hard work has left none of our needs unmet, and they've always been there to guide us and support us along the way. I'm sure we wouldn't be here without you, so thank you. I can probably elaborate on things we should be grateful for hours on end, but we mustn't get carried away. We may have numerous advantages over countless youth our age, yet although some of what we have achieved today is a result of our own hard work, a vast majority of it has really been down to the luck of being born in the right place at the right time. Keeping this in mind, I think we have to always be humble and empathetic to every human being we come across, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, or what they've been through. At the same time, I think we have a responsibility. A responsibility to make the most of the opportunities and advantages we have had access to, by using them to solve some of the flaws in the world's economic, political, and social systems, many of which have been gravely exacerbated in the last few months. For example, in the last few months, hundreds of millions of people have lost their jobs and have struggled to survive without proper safety net to support their survival. And at the same time, the buyer's market we saw back in March has led to the world's billionaires gaining some $300 billion in wealth since 2019. In addition to rising inequality in terms of wealth, we're seeing rising inequality in terms of access to education and healthcare, and even in terms of the risk of contracting this disease itself. The origin of this pandemic and its profound global consequences are also making us question the world's relentless strive for ever-increasing levels of economic growth with little consideration for the long-term environmental damage that it often comes with. And the global response to the health and economic consequences of this pandemic have raised some serious concerns on both the priorities and competence of powerful world leaders and the processes by which they've gained their power in the last few years. These are just a few of the countless problems that the world needs fixing and that I believe we can fix. I know you might think all of this is very naive and overly optimistic, but progress will only come if we dream big and work hard towards it. And sure, the 18 of us might not solve all of the world's problems, but even changing a single life for the better is progress that we can all be proud of. Thank you once again for being here today and giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I think the key going forward is to not define ourselves and be remembered as the class that was victimized by COVID-19, but rather as the class that saw how privileged they were and used that understanding together with the opportunities they had access to make a really positive change in this world. So let's work hard towards that.